Hello, and welcome to this special video on what the world would be like without humans. In this video, we'll explore the many ways that the planet would change if humans were to suddenly disappear. From the rapid reforestation of the planet to the extinction of domesticated animals, we'll examine the many ways that the world would be transformed. We'll also consider the long-term effects of a world without humans, including changes in the global climate and the spread of invasive species. So sit back, relax, and join us as we imagine a world without humans. If humans were to suddenly disappear from Earth, the planet would change in a number of ways. Some of the most significant changes would likely include rapid reforestation. Without human activity, forests would quickly begin to regrow. Trees would take over abandoned farmland in cities, reclaiming the land that was once used for human activities. In some cases, this regrowth could occur relatively quickly, with small shrubs and saplings appearing within just a few years of human abandonment. In other cases, it could take much longer for trees to establish themselves, especially in regions where the climate is not favorable for forest growth. The specific timeline would depend on a number of factors, such as the initial condition of the land, climate, and the presence of seed banks and soil nutrients. The regrowth of forests would lead to an increase in biodiversity, as more animals and plants would have access to new habitats. Forests provide a habitat for a wide variety of animals and plants, many of which have evolved to live specifically in these environments. As forests regrow, animals such as deer, bears, birds, and insects would be able to find food and shelter, leading to an increase in population sizes. The return of forests would also lead to the return of many threatened and endangered species. Reduction in atmospheric carbon dioxide. Without humans burning fossil fuels, the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere would decrease. Trees absorb carbon dioxide through photosynthesis, so as forests regrow, they would remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Additionally, as infrastructure such as roads and buildings fall into disrepair, they would not continue to release the carbon dioxide that is locked in concrete and asphalt. It's important to note, however, that while the regrowth of forests and the collapse of human infrastructure would remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, it's unlikely to be enough to fully reverse the effects of human-caused climate change. The decrease in CO2 would also be balanced by the decomposition of all the organic matter generated by humans. It would take centuries for the planet to remove all the carbon dioxide that humans have added to the atmosphere, and for the global climate to return to pre-industrial levels. The collapse of infrastructure. Without maintenance, cities and other human settlements would quickly fall into disrepair. Bridges, roads, buildings, and other structures would be swallowed up by vegetation, and eventually, only ruins would remain. In densely populated areas, the collapse of buildings and infrastructure would create a layered landscape, with the upper levels of buildings slowly crumbling, while the lower levels become buried by soil and other debris. In less densely populated areas, the effects of the collapse of infrastructure would be more gradual. Roads would become overgrown with vegetation, and buildings would slowly deteriorate. In some cases, the collapse of infrastructure could lead to changes in the local water cycle, as drainage systems and other man-made structures that control the flow of water would no longer be functional. The collapse of infrastructure would also have an effect on the local ecosystem. As buildings and roads are taken over by vegetation, new habitats would be created for animals and plants. Birds and insects would take up residence in abandoned buildings, while small mammals would make homes in the underbrush that takes over abandoned roads and parking lots. The collapse of infrastructure would also lead to changes in the local hydrology. The extinction of domesticated animals. Domesticated animals such as cows, pigs, chickens, and sheep would not be able to survive without human care, and would likely go extinct. Some species, like cats and dogs, have been able to adapt to live without human care, and may survive in small numbers as feral populations. Most of the domesticated animals, however, would not be able to survive and breed in the wild. Their lifespans, fertility, and diet would be vastly different from the wild relatives, and they may not be able to find food and protect themselves from predators. This extinction of domesticated animals would have a significant impact on the environment. Many domesticated animals are used for food, and their disappearance would likely lead to a decline in the populations of predators and scavengers that rely on them for food. Additionally, the loss of domesticated animals could lead to changes in the local ecosystem, as these animals often serve as keystone species, playing a vital role in maintaining the balance of the local ecosystem. The return of wildlife. Without hunting and human development, wildlife populations would likely rebound. Large carnivores like wolves and bears would expand their ranges, returning to areas where they have been eliminated. Many species of birds, insects, and small mammals would also return to areas where they have been pushed out by human activities. The return of wildlife would have a number of ecological benefits. Carnivores play a crucial role in controlling the populations of herbivores, and the return of these species would help to maintain a balance in the ecosystem. The return of birds and insects would also help to pollinate plants and disperse seeds, supporting the growth of vegetation. Changes in the water cycle. Human activities such as the construction of dams and the diversion of water for agriculture and other purposes have altered the natural water cycle in many areas. Without these human impacts, rivers and streams would likely resume their natural patterns of flow, and wetlands and other habitats dependent on them would be restored. The restoration of the water cycle would have a number of ecological benefits. Wetlands and other habitats dependent on natural water flow are home to a wide variety of plant and animal species, and the restoration of these habitats would provide new homes for many of these species. The restoration of the water cycle would also help to maintain a balance in the ecosystem, as water is a vital resource for many species. It's important to note that the specific changes that would occur in the water cycle would depend on the specific region and the initial condition of the land. In some cases, the restoration of the water cycle could take decades or even centuries, as the land adjusts to the new conditions. If you like to watch videos like this, then you can subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to all, so that you can get notified as soon as our new video is uploaded. Changes in ocean ecosystems. With the disappearance of humans, overfishing would come to an end, and fish populations would recover. Many commercial fishing fleets would be left to rust and sink, creating artificial reefs that would attract a diverse array of marine life. The disappearance of humans would also mean an end to other human activities that impact ocean ecosystems, such as pollution and the destruction of coral reefs. The recovery of fish populations and the creation of new artificial reefs would have a number of ecological benefits. Fish play a vital role in the ocean ecosystem, serving as food for larger predatory species and helping to control the populations of smaller organisms. The recovery of fish populations would also support the recovery of species that rely on fish for food, such as seabirds and marine mammals. The creation of artificial reefs would also provide new habitat for a wide variety of marine species, including fish, crustaceans, and mollusks. These reefs would become important centers of biodiversity, supporting a diverse array of plant and animal life. Alterations to the landscape. Humans have dramatically altered the landscape through activities such as urban development, agriculture, and the building of roads and other infrastructure. Without human activities, these altered landscapes would begin to return to their natural states, and ecosystems would establish themselves in new ways. The specific changes that would occur in the landscape would depend on the region and the initial condition of the land. In some cases, the landscape may return to a more natural state relatively quickly, as vegetation takes over abandoned farmland in cities. In other cases, it could take much longer for the landscape to return to its natural state, especially in areas where the soil has been severely degraded or where the climate is not favorable for the growth of certain plant species. As the landscape changes, new habitats would be created for animals and plants. Some species that were previously limited to certain areas may expand their ranges, while others may be forced to adapt to new conditions. The alteration of the landscape would also lead to changes in the local hydrology, as man-made structures that controlled the flow of water would no longer be functional. Changes in the global climate. The disappearance of humans would also mean an end to the burning of fossil fuels and the associated release of greenhouse gases, which could lead to a decrease in global temperatures. However, it could take centuries for the Earth's climate to return to pre-industrial levels, and the specific changes would depend on a number of factors. The burning of fossil fuels is the primary cause of human-caused climate change, and the sudden disappearance of humans would mean an end to this activity. Without the release of greenhouse gases, the Earth's climate would begin to cool, and the planet's temperature would eventually return to pre-industrial levels. It's important to note that the exact timeline for this cooling process is difficult to predict. In summary, without humans, the Earth would change in many ways. Some may be positive, such as slowing down or reversing global warming, increasing biodiversity, and the return of wildlife, while some others may have negative effects, such as the spread of invasive species and overgrowth of certain plants that are not native to the area. It's also important to consider that a world without humans would be vastly different from the one we know, and the planet would continue to evolve, changing and developing in ways we can hardly imagine.